the final whiskey, the fourth permanently available Ardbeg is Corryvreckan. And Corryvreckan, so Ardbeg, the distillery is regarded as a cult whiskey, and I totally agree with that. You know, it's not for everyone, it's really distinctive, it's quite challenging, but when you get it, you really get it and it gets under your skin. Within the range of Ardbeg, you could actually argue the same for Corryvreckan. It's a real cult Ardbeg. It's the most powerful, it's the smokiest, it's the most challenging, but if you give it the time and if you really, you know, get under it and get into every part of this whiskey, it is the one that grabs people the hardest. You know, I've met a few people at whiskey festivals, I've been travelling around the world who say, you know, when I ask them what whiskey do you drink, and they'll say Ardbeg Corryvreckan, and I go, oh great, you like Ardbeg? And they go, no, just Ardbeg Corryvreckan. So it's the only whiskey they drink, and it's one of the few whiskies out of the entire whiskey world that I see getting that kind of absolute, complete devotion. And it really is, it does epitomise so much of what Ardbeg is about. It's raw, it's big and smoky, it's challenging, it's intense, but it also has this swirling undercurrent of other flavours. So it's named after a whirlpool called Corryvreckan, which is one of the biggest whirlpools on earth. You know, slightly, you know, big, powerful, to be treated with respect. So we loved the concept of this amazing big whirlpool that exists just off the coast of Islay, about 40 miles from the distillery. So Dr. Bill and his team set to work making an Ardbeg that, you know, was able to take that name. So it had to live up to the name that they wanted to call it. And Ardbeg Corryvreckan was born out of that. The original idea was to use exclusively French oak casks to make Corryvreckan. French oak, unlike American oak, is full of tannins. Tannins and Scotch whiskey, you need to be careful. If you get it right, it adds structure, it adds a nice level of kind of dryness, which gives a more intense impact on the palate. And it also adds like quite a lot of herbal notes, so makes it quite hibiscus and perfumed. However, if you overdo it, it just completely dries the whiskey out, and really you're left with nothing but just like a very quick experience and like a very short finish, and it's not desirable. So the original aim, the original idea in Dr. Bill's head was probably to use 100% French oak barriques, new French oak barriques, and mature Ardbeg in it. But he quickly realised that the casks were too dry, but they were just absolutely full of potential. They had so much that he could work with. The final recipe of Corryvreckan, I'm speaking quite vaguely here because it does move, but you're looking at about 30% of the whiskey, the beating heart of Ardbeg Corryvreckan, is matured fully in these French oak barriques. The rest of the recipe is Ardbeg and ex-bourbon, that sort of signature style of Ardbeg. And when you get these two together, it gives intensity, it gives this kind of real structured texture. It gives quite a lot of herbal notes, and it absolutely does nothing to hide the smoke. And just to make sure this is the most powerful, the most intense, the biggest Ardbeg experience you can have, it's bottled at 57.1% alcohol. So again, I think even though it's at quite a high strength, the tannins, that cask selection, it's actually very drinkable at that strength. I mean, colour again, that signature Ardbeg, just the smallest amount of colour coming in off the casks, but get your nose right in there. Now, interestingly, I can guarantee you that Corryvreckan is the smokiest Ardbeg that we make. But on the nose, it's not really there. There's a little bit of smoke, but compared to 10, for example, you'd think it's less smoky. What I'm getting is it's like aniseed or star anise, maybe even like blackcurrant or some kind of roasting herbs. This is all from the French oak. If you really want to get everything out of Corryvreckan, I think the best thing to do is to take some water. If you add a splash of water to Corryvreckan, it's almost like it wakes up this whirlpool. You get an explosion of smoke coming out of the glass, and then you also still get to pick up those herbal notes, those medicinal notes, you know, just everything that Ardbeg Corryvreckan has to offer. So I'm going to try it at full strength. I'd say you pick up the smoke more on the palate, but it's really not there in the nose at all. But water, I think water and Corryvreckan, I mostly drink my whiskies neat, but I always add water to Corryvreckan. And you can just see things changing on the surface. You know, things are starting to wake up. and a bit like a whirlpool, things are starting to change underneath. Yeah, it's just throwing water onto Corryvreckan is like throwing water onto a fire. The fire goes out, and then eventually this reek of smoke starts coming out. So, smoky, like a bonfire. Starting to get that seaweed or that TCP coming through again. But it really does balance off with this, like there's black currants in there, there's red berries. That aniseed again really is coming through. Sometimes something a bit like, you know, fennel, you know, there's this lovely note that's in there. So like I say, it's even amongst Ardbeg drinkers, Corryvreckan is not for everyone, but it's one that we absolutely love, and it just expresses so much that Ardbeg is about.